about branding. I've been thinking about branding a ton recently. And one of the things I think about is like building your personal network in your brand. And like I spent 9.5 years there, hundreds of clients, lots of people who have moved into C-level executive positions now. And none of them I can work with. Like none of them are buying what I'm trying to sell now.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that's like, I did all that work, but I was replaced same week, right, by someone else who I think has, I don't know what they're doing, but anyway, man, this is we were talking before I hit go, and just so you know, my style is just let's just talk.
I love it. That's how I am too. Like I love to just dive right into the conversation.
So before I kind of launch into your origin story, if you will, how I met you. So I go to the Citrus Club Bible study the first time, and I do we do the little win of the week, right? And I introduce myself because I was obviously new, and everyone goes, "You need to meet Brody." And I was like, "Who's Brody?" And like they talked you up in the 5 minutes before, like they talked you up big, and I was like, "All right, like this Brody's gonna be like some sort of like this guy's gonna like bust my chops being new or whatever, right?" And then like you sat down, and you're like, "Hey, I'm Brody." I was like, "Oh." Okay. Like in my head, I built you up to be like this big, tough, like jerk. I don't know why I think in my head, I'm like, oh, this guy's going to be like a jerk. He's going to be so like, look down at me being brand new. And you're like, hey.
No, I don't know why they built me up like that. I mean, I'm just a guy, but I mean, I appreciate it. It's a great group of guys and girls there. I mean,
yeah.
It's a really cool group. We're in the same Bible study together, and I've been going now for, I joined at the beginning of last year, so a little over a year I've been in the Bible study, and the group that's kind of formed around that has just been incredible. It's a lot of like just really, really sharp and caring individuals. And so it's been really cool.
Another member in that group, Bobby, Shoutout, Bobby Davidowitz, we've been talking recently. I feel like the conversation's been just doing more and more business and hanging out with people that you like, know, and trust. Like you don't have to do deals you don't want to do. And so that's why I've just been inviting my friends on the podcast, because it's just, one, it's easier, and two, it's like, I know it's going to be a good conversation.
Shout out Bobby. He's the first person I ever heard, and I've heard this a couple times since, but he's the first person I ever heard say the phrase fewer, better deals. And I had just never really thought of it that way. But as soon as he said it, I was like, you know what? I get that. I really resonate with that, because in a world of infinite opportunities and you could do so many different things, that is really the big differentiator, is are you doing things with people that you know, like, and trust? And I think that's kind of the philosophy he was getting at behind it. And so that really stuck with me when he said that, is just fewer, better deals. Put a little bit more thought into it. Really think about who you want to be working with and why. And I think doing that kind of forces you to have the scrutiny of like, what are my values? What are their values? Do we share those? Do we come from the same place? How is that gonna unfold in a business relationship or a deal of some kind? When the hard parts of a deal inevitably come up, are those values going to still be shared? And is there still going to be that shared kind of connective tissue? And so that's something that, I mean, it's a very simple saying, but there's so much behind it. And I think it was just a lot of wisdom from him. Very, very wise guy. He's not an old guy. He's fairly young. He's not too much older than we are, but he's a really, really wise guy.
Yeah. He's a great guy. I love that idea. This might be a tangent, but I feel like obviously AI is the buzzword. I just had lunch with a young commercial real estate agent, and we were having a discussion around AI, right? The firm that he's at has all these tools where it's a lot better than like the Zillow Zestimate, but they can put in an address and it can pull comps instantly. Within 10 minutes, he can tell you, hey, I think this is a marketable rate. Like, here's the reason why. And it's much more intelligent than that. Or these AI calling tools, right, where he puts in parameters of commercial, industrial, building owners, and it just rips through, and then his phone rings and it's like, oh, this person picked up.
Wow.
Right? Like these AI tools. I'm curious your thoughts on, because we're talking about the fewer, better deals. But I feel like one-on-one human relationships is going to be more of a commodity in the future. And do you see people doing fewer, better deals just because they're doing it with people and not all this AI slop in between?
I think eventually that's what people will come to the conclusion of. But I think before that, we're seeing a lot of people see AI as a means to doing a lot more and having their hands in a lot more. And I think sometimes that can work. It really depends on the person. I think it's actually very well suited towards someone, and I relate to this a little bit. Someone like myself, I have a little bit of ADD or ADHD, whatever you want to call it. I like to be working on a few different things at once, and I like to juggle things constantly in business. And so for me, I like to be working on a couple things, but that could be a distracting thing too. And I think that's something that I'm trying to take as much with a grain of salt as possible, because AI is a wonderful tool and that it allows you to do infinitely more than you could before. But I think with that kind of spread of attention and spread of focus can come not everything working as well as you had anticipated. So I think for a while people will try to do way more different things at once, and then they'll eventually realize, like, no, I do need to really just focus on these core kind of connections and do deals with people that I'm aligned with. And it's not easy to find. There are things like the Bible study that we're in that really make it a lot easier, but it's not so easy to find that kind of alignment so often. And I think it's a lot easier to brush past in the world of AI, because it's very much like you can connect with someone immediately and, oh, are you interested in this thing? I'm interested in this thing. This makes sense. Let's do it. So I think people are going to rush into a lot more things and get into a lot more situations, but I think there will be kind of a correction eventually, and people will realize, no, I need to focus on the human connection on the front end at least a little bit more and really understand what I'm getting into.
Yeah. I resonate with the ADHD thing a little bit. I had a buddy a couple of years ago. He house sat for us, and he texted me 2 or 3 days into my wife and I's vacation. He goes, I'm sitting in your office right now on a call, and I'm looking around, and it's like a museum to Chance's past hobbies in here. And because I go from one thing to the next, but if I'm not juggling multiple things and I'm not focused, I work really well under pressure.
Yeah.
So, Brody, what do you do?
It's a complicated question to answer because I do a couple different things, but I work on growing businesses. I would say kind of in the private equity space, maybe micro private equity. So we take equity in businesses that we're trying to propel forward and just make bigger. Sometimes that is in the form of making an actual investment, whether that's from our own cash or someone else's cash, like an investor. Sometimes that's from just sweat equity. We have some kind of resource or knowledge or just time on our hands that we want to put into growing a business, and they see value in giving us equity to do that. So today I've got equity in a couple different businesses, mostly in the home services and construction space here in Orlando. And I'm just working on growing those and helping them thrive. And right now we're trying to acquire a dumpster rental business that is likely about 3 or 4 weeks out from a close if everything continues to move smoothly. So looking to make that kind of like a big platform investment for us, one that is already very established in the space and has layers of management in place that we can just continue to grow and eventually sell later down the road.
Yeah. We won't go into the details of that, obviously, but that's a big deal for you guys.
It's a really big deal. We're excited. We're nervous, excited, banging our heads against the wall, trying to make sure that it happens or that we figure out if it needs to not happen, if that's the right move. Right now, it still looks like a really good deal for us and like something that checks our short-term and long-term goals. So it's a lot to think about. It's been consuming most of the last few months for us, just kind of doing the due diligence and continuing to explore it, look into SBA financing, and really understand everything that we need to understand to find an investor who's willing to put down the money into that to make it really happen. To help them understand the vision of what we're trying to do, to figure out how to articulate that the right way. There's a lot that goes into these deals, and that's even just scratching the surface because, as I know from operating different businesses, and I'm sure you know too, that's the easy part. Doing the actual deal, closing the deal is the tip of the iceberg. And once you're actually into it, then what you actually signed up for comes to fruition, and you've got debt service hanging over your head. You've got investors wanting to know what's going on, and you have to perform, and you have to make sure that the business is thriving and even growing. So it's a big deal, and we're really excited about it, but it's not something to take lightly either.
Yeah. My favorite time of year was always tax time, when you have investors asking for their K-1s and you're like, banging down the door of the CPA, like, hello, like, that's, no one tells you about that part of business.
No,
right?
it's an extra layer of stress for sure.
Yeah. Now, I can't imagine that when you were growing up, you were thinking, man, I can't wait to own a micro private equity
Not
business,
at all.
right? Like, was it any of this even on your radar 10 years ago?
No. To tell you the truth, growing up, I did know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur of some kind because my father owned a business growing up, but I had no idea what that even meant. What I knew is he travels around and meets lots of people, and he seems to have some flexibility to it, but he also works his tail off constantly, and but he enjoys what he does, and he likes who he works with. And so I saw those parts of it. I didn't see a lot of the other parts of it, but I knew I wanted some form of that, but I had no idea what business even meant growing up. I just knew this seems interesting, and maybe that'll be me one day. I didn't know when. I didn't know how early I would get opportunities to dip into that. But I did know that I wanted it. I didn't know what private equity meant, though, at the time. Not until I didn't know what private equity meant until probably 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So 2 years. Wow. Okay. So we're going to get to that. I would love to ask, though, how old were you when you think you kind of realized that, hey, my dad's doing this differently than my friends' dads?
That's a good question. I got to give some thought to that. I think I had some early experiences, like as early as like 7, 8 years old, working in the business a little bit, actually.
Okay.
And so my dad, he sold custom suits. He had basically like a traveling custom suit business where he would go meet lawyers, doctors, business people, and he would basically just help them pick out what they wanted their custom suits to look like. He would put them together, order them, and deliver them. And so he had to market and advertise for himself. And one of the ways that he did that is he would find like little swatches of really cool suits that he was interested in. And he would cut out little swatches of like that big, like a little kind of piece of fabric, put it in a mailer, and send out like all these mailers. So as soon as I was 7, 8 years old, he was like, here's what the mailers look like. Here's what the swatches look like. Here's a pair of scissors. How does $5 an hour sound? And he was like, here's how you put the mailer together. Just start putting them together. Here's the list. So I got to start working in the business a little bit and kind of understand that from an early age. And that was an experience that really my friends weren't having. So I think that planted a seed early. But I really didn't feel like a difference until he started having some more success in the business. It took him a while. Like, there's a lot of ups and downs. He started the business like around 2001, and that was a tough time for the economy. He was coming out of being in like the tech recruiting space. And so it was a challenging time to get started with a business, and there was a ramp-up time that it took for him to really figure it out. And then a few years later, it was 2007, 2008. That was another tough time for the economy. So there was times where it felt like we had it all, and we were going on vacations and things were going well. There was other times where we're like, hey, we're tight right now. Like, we're meal prepping, and we're not buying the things that your friends are buying, and we're not going on trips. So I felt both sides of that from early, but I really started feeling it once he got kind of 10, 15 years in, and eventually 20 years in, and I started seeing the business grow to him having actual people working in it. It kind of went beyond like a person working in a business as just themselves with a few supporting characters and vendors to an actual business that was employing people. That's when I started seeing him have a little bit more flexibility in his life and be able to afford more things that he wanted and to be able to provide more things that he wanted. And it just, that I would say I was probably about 17, 18 when I really started seeing kind of like the long-term fruits of those labors come together, and started realizing he's doing this a lot differently than like my friends' parents.
Yeah.
And started really getting interested.
So I think first job, we'll give you a little bit of a pass, filling fabric swatches into envelopes. Well, okay, but your first true job.
Chick-fil-A. I'm one of those guys. And whenever I tell someone that, they're like, of course. I still haven't figured out what that means.
I can see it.
But
I can see it.
that's what
Yeah.
everyone says. And I still haven't figured out what that means, but I think it's funny. Chick-fil-A in high school. So I started at Chick-fil-A. Anytime I hear my pleasure, I get a little bit of PTSD. But it was a really good job. It was a really good first job, and I enjoyed it a lot for all the struggles of having to say my pleasure all the time.
Can you still eat there, or are you like Chick-fil-A'd out?
Honestly, you would think that I would be Chick-fil-A'd out. I just liked it more and more the longer I worked there.
Really?
It's like one of my favorite fast food places. There's just the right amount of variety, I think, and it's actually like quality food. It's gonna sound like I'm like a Chick-fil-A spokesperson saying that.
How much stock you got in that?
I wish, man, that'd be awesome. But no, it's honestly, I think it's fantastic food,
Yeah.
and it's a good option. They've got a lot of like good healthy options, which is important to me for a fast food place. The salads, the wraps, and I got a free meal every time I worked, which was really cool. So for me, it was like I was trying to eat healthy and be in shape, and then there's this prospect of having a milkshake every time I work. So I had to contend with that, but I also got to kind of figure out the healthy options and enjoy those, and I like it a lot.
I would not have had the what do you want to say, the willpower to say no to their cookies and cream milkshake is just too good, man.
I'll do you one better. We got the kind of like off menu secrets. So I would do like a combination, because the cookies and cream was just the vanilla with Oreos mixed in, and we would blend it. But then there was also the chocolate milkshake. So we got to do the chocolate milkshake with the Oreos mixed in and kind of just make that on our own. That is a ridiculous milkshake.
That's
that one I could rarely say no to.
I'm going to get one of those on the way home if they'll let me. Okay, so you only got into the micro PE thing 2 years ago. So we're talking 17, and we had about 10, 12 years here to probably contend with. So what did you do during that time? You went to college, I assume?
I did go to college at UCF. So for my undergrad, I basically was just kind of working odd jobs a lot of the time. I was privileged to be able to focus on my studies for the most part, but there was other things like extracurriculars that I wanted to do. So I was always kind of working odd jobs and doing extra stuff to like be able to afford to do those. But right out of college, I was actually a personal trainer. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had majored in finance all the way through and graduated in that. And the one thing that I thought at the time was, because I had worked one finance internship, was I don't want to work in finance. Like that was a total waste. And the one thing that I was kind of passionate about at the time was fitness, because it had just changed my life a lot. And so I went and became a personal trainer for about a year and a half right before COVID, right out of college. And that's what I was doing. And I kind of learned sales in that job more than the fitness aspect. I came in with a lot of knowledge and the license and everything to be a personal trainer. But more than anything, I kind of learned like sales, relationship management, and that sort of thing from that time. But then COVID hit, and the gym closed, and I was out of work, and I was furloughed, but at a very reduced rate. So I was like, I don't know what's going to happen with COVID. I have to go try to figure out something else and kind of reinvent myself a little bit. And I still kind of had in the back of my mind that, I want to be an entrepreneur one day. I don't know how you get there. I don't know what the steps are. I don't know how to develop that. My father had been in corporate America before he was ever an entrepreneur. So for me, that was kind of the pathway, is like go kind of learn business there and then go figure out what you want to do. So I was kind of looking for mentors at the time. And as my kind of like vision for myself was falling apart and COVID was not allowing me to do what I was doing, I had reinvented myself a little bit, and I had a cousin at the time that was working in digital marketing, and I went and talked to him because he was probably 6 or 7 years older than me at the time, and it seemed like he really had his life figured out. He had bought a house, he was having a lot of success in his career, and he lived in town at the time. And so I went and just kind of talked to him about things, and he told me about like working in digital marketing. Now he was basically working with all these different businesses and getting to learn from them how they were making money, how they were succeeding, but also bring this very important skill that was growing in importance day after day, month after month, year after year. And so he encouraged me to go get a certificate in digital marketing. And so I did that through UCF as well. And believe it or not, I still maintain, I think it was way more valuable than my whole undergraduate degree. It took like 6 months, I think. It was 6 months of like very heavy duty, like boots on the ground, like real projects that we were working on. But I think it was way more valuable than my undergraduate. And so I learned some of those skill sets, took a digital marketing job, kind of corporate type of job, basically working for Marriott on their like digital team. So I was managing this kind of portfolio of different hotels all over the country and even a little bit outside of the US, and basically helping them manage their paid ad spend, their content, their SEO, and everything all together. And I would basically just meet with them on calls and like see where things were at and help them kind of plan around that, and then coordinate with the team behind the scenes, like pulling the levers. So that was a really cool experience, because not only did it help me kind of develop those like relationship management and client management skills that I think I'm seeing are more and more important in what I do now, but it allowed me to see kind of like what are the different aspects that bring together like a functioning business. There's all these different levers that have to be pulled when it comes to digital marketing. And you get to hear things about how the sales team is performing and what kind of things go into that. And you start to see all these different levers that move together in a business. And that was kind of the first time that I really started to feel like, okay, I actually understand a little bit more what it takes for a business to succeed and grow. So I was working in that for a while, but during the time it was like still kind of early COVID. It was a remote job. And so I had all this time on my hands. I was probably getting my work done in 2 or 3 hours a day most of the time. And so I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur still. And I was thinking, okay, well, how am I going to get there quicker? I need to just start dipping my toe in and trying to do it. So at the same time I was working that job, I was basically taking all kinds of different consulting gigs with small businesses, doing anything from helping them figure out how to send invoices digitally if they didn't know how to do that, to making a little website, to figuring out email marketing, just whatever I could kind of do to get my foot in the door. And so I started making all these connections that were small business owners. And eventually I met who became my partners in the first business that I was involved in, which was a staffing business. So I started off just doing a little bit of like consulting work, digital advertising for this guy that was a chef. And at the same time, I had made a couple other connections. I think I met him through my friend Andy at the time. And Andy called me one day and was basically like, hey, you know that guy that I introduced you to? Him and this other guy have this idea for an app. It's going to be an app for private chefs. And they basically want it to be the Uber or the Airbnb of booking a private chef. And they have a Facebook group of 37,000 chefs all over the U.S. And it's like they think that they can really grow this very fast. But they need people that kind of understand the technical aspects, the digital marketing, the finance, and can kind of like just build in the air with them. So I ended up going and meeting with them and hearing a little bit about it. And I said, you know what? I can't quit my job, but I'm going to come help you guys build this. And I think it's probably about February or March of 2021 at the time. I was just a couple months rather into this job, but I kind of took on that extra responsibility and was just meeting with them when I could and helping to kind of like build this idea. But it took us about 9 months of just building before we even like got a contract or anything. So all of a sudden, kind of out of nowhere, we got this contract for basically staffing 70 chefs. Not all at once, but kind of over the next few weeks. We got it through like a university up in Chicago, and we had no idea what we were doing, but we just said yes and figured it out later.
Because wasn't this an app for like Uber for private chefs? So like
it was originally supposed to be, and that's what we were trying to do for those kind of 8 or 9 months. But I'm glad you asked that, because I got a really good piece of advice from someone who kind of became a mentor along the way, We were probably like 4 or 5 months into trying to build this, and we had paid a lot of money like between all of us to try to get like all these mock-ups of what the app was going to look like and how it was going to function, and just launch an app and hope it succeeds from there.
Because anyone listening to this, even now or 6 months from now, they'd be like, well, you just plug it into the AI and it creates the app. But
of course,
2 years ago, you had to have
this was 2021.
Yeah, so 5 years ago, you had to have a framework built for it, right? You use Figma or something like that to do the mock-up. You had to have a product
Figma's
designer,
exactly what we used.
you know, to do all the colors and how everything works. And like, it wasn't, you don't do that in a week,
Yeah.
you know.
So we were paying money, taking time, doing all this stuff to kind of bring that vision together. And I ended up being lucky enough to sit with this guy that had worked for Airbnb actually back in the day, like as they were kind of like getting a lot of funding and getting off the ground. And he had worked on a couple other startups, and he had moved to Jacksonville, where I lived at the time, from like Silicon Valley area. And he sat down and heard my idea, and he was like, you're building the app before you built the business. Like, you have it backwards. So his advice was, don't build an app, build maybe a website first, but more importantly, just focus on getting the jobs, getting the contracts, and actually making money in the business. He was really kind of teaching me like a crucial lesson at the time, which was pre-sell the thing and actually validate the business model before you sink all this money and time in, and maybe you're wrong. And so I had heard that, and it hadn't really sunk in, like, what does that mean and what do I do about it yet? But a couple months later, in the Facebook group that we had all these chefs in, we started hearing about these little projects. Like, hey, we need 7 chefs here, or we need 10 chefs here, we need 20 chefs here. And we're like, what if we became kind of the arbiter of that? And so the model basically started to evolve to, maybe we're going to be a staffing company instead of a private chef placement company. And then all of a sudden, we heard about this giant government contract actually on like I forget, I think it was in Indiana, if I remember right, where they basically needed, they had all these Afghan refugees that were like on the base, and they needed all these chefs to come basically serve them food. And so we realized, okay, there's an opportunity for us to bid on this and maybe win this big contract worth a lot of money and really get ourselves started. And we basically failed to get that contract because there's a lot of stuff that we didn't have in place. But a week later, we heard about another contract up at Northwestern University in Chicago, where they basically like did not require all that stuff. There's a lot of like government contracting stuff we didn't have in place. So we were like, hey, I don't think we were wrong with the thinking. We just weren't ready for this contract. So let's see if we can get this. And we actually did get that one. And so all of a sudden it was like the model's changed, but we have this huge contract worth a few $100,000 over the course of like the next rest of the semester. And if we can just deliver on that and figure that out, then we can really get this started and go find other contracts from there. And so that was the first kind of business experience that I had. And so it was a really wild ride. It's the company's called Chef on the Fly, by the way. And I worked on that from kind of the end of 2021 when that took off to about May, or I think we closed in June of 2023. Basically, we sold to a bigger staffing company. And still at the time, I didn't really know anything about private equity. I didn't know why they were buying us. I didn't know what they were interested in. But I was like, I don't know. I want to have an exit and see what that looks like and how that works. And so I exited the company. It got purchased. They kept one of the partners on, but me and the other partner exited. And we're like, awesome. What's next?
Dude, isn't that the American dream, man? Just a bunch of guys just, hey, should we bid on a government contract?
Yeah.
Isn't that the plot for, what is it, War Dogs?
Yes, I think so. Except they figured it out.
Yeah, I mean, you guys figured it out too.
In a different
I
way,
think didn't those guys go to jail?
Those guys did do it.
Yeah, so
go
I
to
mean,
jail.
you guys did much
Maybe
better.
better
than
that we didn't get that government contract.
I don't, just it's a quick aside. Have you ever looked at the government contracts out of Central Florida for like random stuff that Orlando puts out?
A little bit, yeah.
I've looked at some of these and I'm like, man, if I had an absurd amount of money, I would just bid on these and just see if I could build something out of it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it'd be kind of fun. That'd be a fun little hobby project, but
it would. There's some major businesses. Like, I've met some like aggregators of government contract businesses before, which is a crazy thing to say. It's a whole nother topic to explain, like unpack like kind of what that means. But they're basically people that will just go and buy businesses that are completely built around like taking advantage of government contracts. So it's a really good space to be in if you can figure it out and kind of find your footing. There's a lot of like red tape to get into it, but if you do get all the things in place and kind of like have all the bells and whistles that they're looking for and like have the licenses and the DUNS number and everything like that, then you can get these incredible contracts that are sometimes very long term and very like guaranteed. And the worth of something like that when you're trying to sell a business or even just trying to get financing to grow the business more is like, it's hard to measure just how valuable that is, because it's like kind of this level of certainty that comes in the business that if someone's trying to buy a business or a bank is thinking about lending to the business, they just see it in a completely different light that way.
Yeah, I actually, I give this example when people ask me, what's my business worth? And the answer is always like, well, it depends. And it's like, well, Google told me 3 to 5x SDE. Okay, well, how do you define SDE? Right. And there's always a story to be told. And the example I always give is like, imagine you've got 2 print shops, one in Waterford Lakes, one in Claremont, right? They're both doing $1 million in revenue and their SDE's $250,000. Are they worth the same amount of money? Well, it depends, right? All right, the one in Claremont's got 500 clients. The one in Waterford Lakes has 1 client. Well, now you're like, okay, well, I want the Claremont one, right? Because they've got more clients. Oh, but the one in Waterford Lakes has Disney on a 50-year contract.
It's a different story.
The story, you can go back and forth with all these different examples, and it depends. And the long-term contract thing, long-term client status, like that's a big piece. Do you ever wish you would have stayed on?
Yes and no. To tell you the truth, we weren't really a fan of like what the plan was for after the acquisition, or like kind of like who we were going to be working with at the time. And I've spoken about that before. I mean, that's like what we told our partners at the time, and me and the partner that exited felt that way. The one that stayed didn't. So we weren't really a fan of like how that was going to look, and it didn't seem like something that was kind of aligned with our values at the time. But a part of me wishes I would have stayed on like with some contingencies. And this is something I tell people that are thinking about selling their business now, is one of the most underrated ways to get the maximum value out of your business is to have more flexibility in the sale. Because if you just put yourself in the shoes of the person buying your business and thinking about considering buying your business, they're looking for that same certainty that we talked about earlier. So the more that they can rely on you at least being available for some input or some consulting or some coaching after the business, that starts to decrease the uncertainty that they're walking into. So that becomes worth a lot to them, and it might mean that they pay more upfront. It might mean they pay more over time, but you can increase the actual valuation of your business and the amount that you get out of it, like overall, just by having a little bit more flexibility in the process and being a little bit more open to things. So do I wish I would have stayed on? Not necessarily, because things have worked out well for me since, and kind of I think that I'm on the right track for like what I'm supposed to be doing, kind of what I've been called to do. But I do wish that I would have approached it with some more flexibility, and that's something that I couldn't really see until I was on the other side.
Yeah. Do you think you could do it again?
I don't know. It's a tough one. Whenever someone asks me about startups, which by all measures, that was a complete startup. The more I get into business, and I'm only 5 years in now, but the further I get into like business and trying to be an entrepreneur and kind of grow my career there, the more against startups I am, because it's a tough proposition, man. I was telling a very young guy this yesterday, actually, because he was asking me, he's kind of interested in getting into the private equity space. And he found someone who could be a really good fit as kind of an investor, someone who has a business that they want to expand and that he could help them expand by finding the right deal. He was tossing back and forth the idea of, should we look for something where we can just invest into like a new arm of the business, a new build out of a facility and all this stuff, basically kind of a startup to add to the business, or should we look to acquire an existing business? And I told him just straight up, I'm going to be one of the most biased people you could talk to about that, because I've lived the startup life, and it's hard. It's really hard. What I didn't tell you about that whole experience is not only did I take probably $8,000 out of my savings from like working other jobs and stuff to be able to get that business to even get off the ground in the first place and not go under. But, and I was able to recoup that after our first contract got underway. But I also deferred any kind of like salary or any kind of dividend or distribution of any kind until probably 9 months after we got that first contract. So it was a lot of like just diving in full force and putting all my effort and time and as much as I could bear into it, while also deferring compensation and deferring gratitude, or deferring why can I not think of that term? Deferring kind of the gratification is what I was trying to think of. Deferring gratification. And so the prospect of like being involved in a startup is really tough because the business needs everything from you and more to be able to even succeed. It needs probably your money, your time, as much as you can give both of them. And then it needs to continue taking the profit that it does get and reinvesting that into the next stage of growth to get to the size that it can even pay you something that would be worth you focusing on it full time. And sometimes that takes a couple months for people. Sometimes that takes years. And so you don't really have that certainty going in. So whenever someone's kind of looking at getting into a startup, I try to encourage them just to think about that potential pain on the other side of it and how much do you have kind of set aside and how much can you bear that pain and that deferred gratification, and can you make that work? Or would it be better to just step into an existing business where maybe you have some debt service, you have some of those things to consider, but you can pay yourself a salary right off the bat and still have some cash flow left over to continue reinvesting into the business. And I wish that's something I would have known about beforehand, because I think we got really lucky, to tell you the truth, and kind of fell backwards into success. And I was young and inexperienced at the time and didn't really have any business like falling into that kind of success. But looking back, I think it would have been a lot more sure bet to step into an existing business.
Do you think that was a benefit though? I mean, you weren't married, you don't have kids, although I do hear that you may or may not have gotten engaged recently.
I am engaged, yeah. As of very recently. Do you think your inexperience, and I mean that in the kindest ways, your inexperience was why you were so lucky? It could be, yeah. I didn't have to worry about those things as much. And I mean, I know people that are in a very different situation that have gone into a startup. Maybe they have kids or they have other things that they're, I mean, to use the other extreme, if things got rough during that, I could eat ramen and live in a place that was $300 a month. You could do that back then. And I did live somewhere $400 a month during college. And so I could keep my expenses absurdly low and be able to defer that gratitude a little, or that gratification a little bit more. And I had the time, the energy, and the low overhead to be able to make that work. And, you know, you get further and further in life and you don't have all those things. You kind of get past those things. So, but I think it depends a lot on your situation and like where you're coming from and who the person is. When I try to tailor that advice, in the case of this guy I was talking to, he was looking to partner with someone who had a long career behind them already, and they're not in a position where it would be a good thing for them or their family to kind of take that leap and take that risk, or it would create a lot of strife and a lot of struggle on the other business to do so. So I think it's more important than anything to kind of look at your personal situation, like what do you need to be able to give the business what it needs, and can you square that with what it needs from you today?
Yeah, no, I love that, and I feel like I've shared this before, but I was in one of those spots, right, where you got the golden handcuffs, and it's like I'm not going to do anything because this is too good, and you don't realize that you're actually locked up.
Yeah.
And you're not fulfilling any of the things that you really are capable of doing. Would I go out and start a startup today? I say no, but when I got kicked out of corporate America, what did I do? I'm going to be an entrepreneur again, right? This time I didn't buy a business, although I'm not just saying this because I'm a business broker, but I love people who buy businesses because everything's there, right? And as long as you find the right deal. right? It's kind of hard to, I shouldn't say it's kind of hard to mess it up. You can 100% lose all your money and more, especially using SBA financing, personal guarantees, all that kind of stuff. It's risky, but it's less risky than saying, hey, I'm going to take $200,000 and I'm going to build this thing that isn't proven yet.
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons for that is because if you can support yourself and like, I mean, everyone has bills to pay at the end of the day. Everyone's got bills to pay, mouths to feed, and a certain amount that they need to be able to make things work day to day. And the way I see it is the kind of trade-off for you, like going all into something and being able to bring that time and that attention is you need to make sure things are taken care of on the home front, no matter who you are. And so I think that if someone buys a business and they're able to have those things kind of like taken care of and have a little bit of that nest egg that comes with it, you buy a big business, it comes with working capital typically. Like the one that we're looking at right now, not only do they loan the price that the business costs, but they loan working capital to make sure we've got cushion to grow the business and keep things afloat. So you get some of those basic things in place just from the jump to be able to like make sure that your needs are taken care of. And that affords you the ability to say, okay, I'm going to go all in, burn the bridges, burn the boats behind me, and actually focus on that. I think it depends on the person too. Like I think anyone in that position kind of looking between the two has to think about what is my personality. And you mentioned earlier, I'm really good under pressure. You put yourself in a situation like that, or you end up in a situation like that, that's pressure, man. And if you're good under pressure and you know that about yourself, then that's a completely different prospect than someone who maybe is not so great under pressure and has maybe a little bit of a lacking track record to themselves of being able to make it work when they have to. And I think someone who hasn't proven to themselves that they can be good under pressure, I think might be doing themselves a disservice, kind of like burning the bridges and just diving into something. But on the flip side, if you do well under pressure and you're driven by that, I relate to that a lot as well. I sometimes try to like invent pressure that's not there for myself because I just notice that it drives me more. I think someone like that, like you can actually benefit from putting yourselves into certain situations and kind of putting your back against the wall on purpose because you know you're going to get the best out of yourself.
Yeah. Putting things on your calendar with the red exclamation point. It's like, I need to get this done. It's like, but why? It's like, because I told myself I have to get it done today. You know? So, so now we're kind of caught up more towards to where we're at now in present timeline. So you exit the business and there's a little bit of a gap there between then and now, right? That's 2023, you said?
Yeah.
So the last 3 years, what'd you do? I guess let me first ask, closing happens, wire hits your bank account. What'd you do?
It's a weird feeling. I call that time my time in the desert because I made the gravest of mistakes and I didn't figure out what I was doing after the exit before the exit happened. I kind of had this like blind like laser focus on like once it was like there and we knew that it was probably going to happen. I had this blind laser focus on like how do we get there and how do we do it right and make sure that we have the best outcome.
Well, it's not a done deal, right?
It's not a done deal.
A deal is never done until the wire's in your account.
It's true. And then the wire hits your account and you're like, oh, well, what do I do now?
Yeah. And then you get panicked because you're like, I have all this money sitting in my checking account. Like, what do I
actually do with it? And so I spent, honestly, like a month and a half just having no clue what I wanted to do. And it was a lot of just, it was a really rough time on me, honestly. Like, that's why I literally call it like my time in the desert. It was like rough. I was uncertain. I felt unclear, just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I started reflecting on like, okay, what if I had built this more intentionally for a sale? What if I had kind of put the pieces in place a little bit more strategically? Now that I know what I know, how could I have had kind of like a more life-changing exit in something that put me into a completely different stratosphere or made the business something that, you know, grew even faster and got to a bigger place? And so I started reflecting on that a lot and thinking, well, what if I just tried to go start doing that for other businesses, kind of take some of those things I learned and try to be intentional with other people in their businesses and not have to quite get into that startup mode again. So I kind of ended up finding myself in a startup anyway, and I started my company, Scale for Sale. That's what this shirt is. And at the time, I still hadn't really heard of private equity or how that worked. I didn't really know why someone bought our business or really viscerally understand that. But as I started to unpack this more and more, I realized like they were buying this with the purpose of rolling up multiple different brands all under one umbrella and combining them and eventually later down the road selling that package. And so I started exploring that more, having more conversations with people like business brokers, like mergers and acquisitions advisors. I started interviewing a lot of people. I actually just did kind of a dedicated LinkedIn outreach campaign, and I probably connected with 500 or 600 people all in the space just over the next like month and a half or two. And I started just trying to get on Zoom calls with them or phone calls and just interview them about like what made you get into what you're doing now? Like what opportunities do you see in the space? How could I help you? And tried to find like ways that I could find other businesses to help. And what I ended up landing on is just kind of creating like a consulting offer. So I would come into businesses, we would kind of decide on like a monthly retainer of some kind, and I would just be basically working on helping them craft their exit plan and get them more ready for sale. So that's where the name comes from. It's like helping a business scale for a sale. And so I did that for kind of that time, like a few months after we closed, which was mid-year. So kind of starting in like the fall of 23 through like near the end of 2024. And I had kind of met some interesting business owners along the way, worked with a lot of different ones. And I ended up meeting my partner, Grant, just through ads that I was running, actually. I was running ads to find business owners and just doing it through my Instagram.
Pulling back from that digital marketing certificate experience.
Yeah, pulling from some of that experience and from some like other mentors I had met in the space. I taught myself kind of how to run Facebook ad, or at the time it was like Facebook and Instagram ads, so like the meta ads that we see today. So I started running meta ads and just meeting different business owners, was finding some of my consulting contracts that way. And I ended up meeting one that was here in town that was thinking about selling his business or at least trying to structure himself the right way. His name is Grant. We ended up sitting together, having a conversation. He had this really strong background in sales, which I felt like was kind of like a lacking area for me. It wasn't really what my role was in that startup before. And so we got together and started kind of figuring out like what we wanted this thing to be. And it started to evolve more from like these consulting contracts, which were great and kind of like helped build the experience, but were these like, they were kind of this fixed term thing that wasn't like building like a big long term potential plan for us. That started shifting into more long term approaches. And in early 2025, we had kind of like decided that we wanted to partner together somehow, really even towards the end of 2024. And we started to kind of just like figure out what that was going to look like more and more. And he had time left over from running his business he was building, from putting layers of management in place and kind of building it intentionally, where he could help me work on this. And so we just started kind of building Scale for Sale up together more so. And we kind of found like a niche in the home services and construction space because we just saw how much opportunity there was in Central Florida at the time. There was just so much construction happening, so much migration happening here, that we kind of felt like there was like a major tailwind behind those types of industries. And we found ourselves like consulting with a lot of different ones of them and finding a lot of patterns in them too. Like from one business to the other, we just realized, okay, at the end of the day, you need to build solid marketing and sales processes and then a great production team and figure out how to marry the two. And so what we were learning from one business was kind of applying to the next and so on. And so we actually took our first kind of equity deal it started as a consulting deal in early 2025, and then we took our first equity deal for it kind of mid 2025 with a business that we had been working in. And we just focused on kind of growing that one more and more. We're kind of doing some other consulting gigs on the side. And that one kind of got to the space where now we're actually working on like finalizing an exit from it. And it's grown a lot. It basically doubled in profit last year, just from like kind of the collective effort of everyone working on it. And so from that experience, we kind of got a taste of like, okay, we built considerable long-term equity in such a short time working on this established business. But there was also so much that we felt like we missed out on operating from like a minority equity position, because we were still in a minority equity position, and we hadn't gotten to a position where we could kind of like make the big decisions, decide if we wanted to bring in investment capital or acquire another business. So the one thing that we knew at the time is like, we know we want to work on this together and continue kind of expanding these holdings. And as I had started having these conversations and working with different business owners, helping them scale their business, prepare them for sale, I realized there's a huge opportunity to sell to private equity firms. They're giving some of the biggest multiples that businesses can get. They're well capitalized enough for the business owner that does want to stay on and have some upside after their sale to be able to get in and grow to a level that they just couldn't have done on their own. And like economics just wouldn't have allowed it. And so I got really interested in that, because I thought, okay, as we're building this experience, maybe we can start to find situations where if we start meeting investors and bankers and brokers and the right people, that we can actually put some of these major plays together. And so as that continued, we just started meeting more and more business owners, and we just that's kind of where we found ourselves today. And so I'd say kind of micro private equity, because we're not doing big deals necessarily. We're still working with very small businesses, but we've found kind of this like sweet spot for us personally, at least, where we can get into these businesses, and a lot of it hasn't been figured out yet in these small sizes. Like a lot of the rolling up your sleeves and figuring out the hard stuff still has to be done and still has to be figured out. Business models need to be tweaked. The right hires need to be made. And so that's a lot more exciting for us, and there's a lot more potential upside, because you can double a business in a year. Like, that's possible. That's not quite as possible when you get to the bigger size businesses, and you might be getting like 1% of something really large, but the kind of potential delta of like, okay, it was at a 3% growth rate and we can work our tails off and get it to a 4% growth rate. It's just not something that excites us as much, and maybe that'll change one day and we'll kind of move on to that. But for now, we really enjoy like working very intimately with that small business owner and helping them actually like not only grow their business dramatically overnight, but like change their life overnight. And that's kind of just naturally evolved into, what is the next step we could take in this? We could acquire a business and be majority equity holders and be able to take these really big swings. And, you know, if we want to bring in an investor and start acquiring other businesses and make it a whole roll up, we can do that.
I love that you, I'm just chuckling to myself because you keep saying micro and small deals. And yes, compared to some of the private equity firms, your deal is small. But if anyone knew the details, they would be like, that's not a small deal. Brody.
No, it's not. It's definitely not.
You know, I mean, it's impressive, man. It's impressive what you guys have done in, 18 months?
It's been a relatively short period of time. It has, but it's been just a lot of like really rolling up our sleeves and trying to learn from our mistakes. And man, there's been more mistakes than hits. That's just kind of the nature of business. But yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It's definitely been. I'm in a position that is a lot different than anything I even knew about a couple of years ago, and not something I would have necessarily expected. I didn't really know necessarily what to expect out of this whole journey, but it's been rewarding.
What does your dad think?
So my dad actually passed away. That's kind of the part of the story I didn't get into. I hope he thinks fondly of it, but he passed away in 2021, actually within the same 2-week period of getting that first contract for Chef on the Fly. So I've talked about this kind of in an interview before, but it was like, kind of like, put simply, it was like the best thing that ever happened to me and the worst thing that ever happened to me, both kind of coinciding at the same time. And like, he got in a motorcycle accident and a few weeks later passed away from the injuries. And like literally as that was unfolding and happening, we had boots on the ground arriving at this contract, and we were like in go mode trying to figure out this startup that needed everyone's attention. So it was one of those moments that I think, you know, it turned me kind of from a boy to a man very quickly. I think I kind of aged like 10, 20 years, it felt like, in the span of maybe a month.
Yeah.
And it was just a really, really crazy experience to go through. But I think if he was here today, I think he would be excited about how much earlier in my life I got to venture into entrepreneurship and start to learn lessons from it and play in these different fields, because at his core and like in his heart of hearts, like he was just an entrepreneur through and through. And I don't think he necessarily saw the path, because no one in our family had done that before. He was really the first one to ever do it. And for him, it was, you go get a job, you work hard, and you build your career. And he kind of just naturally found the route into entrepreneurship. And I got to see that modeled for me. I was very lucky in that sense. And so I think it'd be a combination of him being very excited that I got to experience that earlier in my life, and that I got to actually stick with it and start to build upon that. And also kind of just like I think he would probably want to be getting involved, honestly. I think he would want to like figure out some of these deals with me and have a piece in it and try to bring some of his expertise. And I think we'd be having a lot of fun with it together. But I like to think that he's kind of looking down and just smiling, knowing that I'm an entrepreneur now, and I got to see what that's like.
And he got to see you going through the changes of Chef on the Fly. Now, did you guys get the contract before he passed?
We did, actually. Yeah. So it was September. The accident was September 19th. Boots hit the ground, I think, September 24th for that contract.
So you guys were underway.
There was a little bit of lead time. So I think we had signed the contract, actually, and he knew, like, oh, this is actually something.
Like, he did it.
Because he had seen the startup phase of it unfolding, and he saw, and he was incredibly supportive of it. Like,
never told you to go to corporate America.
Never
told you to give up on it.
He could not have been more supportive of it. I mean, he was so excited about it, and in 2020, we even formed like an entity together when I started getting into the digital marketing stuff, and I still have that entity today. And it's one that we started together and wanted to like figure out things to do together. But he got to see all the way from like, this was just a seedling of an idea of something that could maybe be something, to he's putting money into it and like trying to figure these things out, finding mentors to help him kind of shape the path, all the way to they signed a contract.
Yeah.
And this could really turn into a real business.
That's beautiful, man.
It was cool.
That's something we share there. When my stepdad passed almost 12 years ago now, but I was on track to go to med school.
Really?
And talk about, again, you mentioned earlier your degree that you use your degree.
My degree came full circle in a weird way.
My degree's in biology. I'm not using it at all. I have a podcast on YouTube.
You could probably analyze a medical business a lot better than the next broker, though.
I do annoy the doctors whenever I take my kids to the ER or my wife has a doctor's appointment. I do annoy them because I know just enough to be annoying. But another like boy to man story, like we talked about golden handcuffs earlier. Man, if I went to med school, I never would have taken any of these swings, right? I would just be finishing now, and it's like,
that's crazy to think about. Yeah,
that's crazy to think about. If I was smart enough to get through all those tests, the ADHD sometimes is a deterrent, of course. I would love to know, man, like, what's next, right? I know what you're building here, but like, this can't stay micro for long.
Yeah, and I think you're right about that. I think what's next is we just start to do bigger and bigger deals as we go. And for me, like whenever someone asks like, why do I do this? And like, what drives me in this? For me, it really is just like, it's a love of the game kind of thing. Like I very genuinely enjoy, I mean, of course everyone's money motivated to a degree, and this is a good space to get into if you're money motivated. And there's kind of like a natural scoreboard that helps with that. And more of that comes with bigger deals. But more than that, for me, it's the kind of satisfaction of like getting to that next level. I grew up playing a lot of video games, and I kind of had that like that itch in me of like I will always want to get to the next stage of progression and like level up more and more and more.
What was your video game of?
But I was a big Pokemon guy,
Okay.
believe it or not.
Okay.
I played a lot of that. I played a lot of Call of Duty, Battlefield, all the kind of basic stuff.
Yeah. Battlefield.
Yeah.
That was good. My wife, quick aside, we'll come back to the point. My wife and I are rewatching all of the Star Wars movies in order.
Great movies.
And so Battlefront,
Yes.
Republican Commando. I'm like talking about all these games,
The
and she's
old
like,
Battlefront. It was a perfect game.
"That's going to be a YouTube short." So you were saying like putting these pieces together, right? Like the bigger deals, I would imagine you're probably going to get a little more complex, right? Or you think you're going to stay in the home services space solely?
It's a good question. I think it depends on like what kind of comes across the desk for us, because I hear about a lot of different opportunities all the time, and for most things I have to kind of say like, hey, let me introduce you to someone, or we're not the right fit for that, because you can only work on so many different things at once. Yeah. So it really depends on what opportunities come across my desk and like what makes sense at the time. But for the foreseeable future, I think we'll be in home services and or construction for a very long time because of just the macro trends of being in Orlando. I don't have really any interest in moving outside of Orlando right now. Definitely have interest in traveling more. I've always loved traveling, and I've been fortunate enough to get to go to other countries, and I just want more and more of that in my life. For now, home base is Orlando for a long time, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And so in Orlando, there's so much construction going on. There's so many people moving here that you just have such an unfair advantage being in some of those industries. And that goes for a lot of different industries. I mean, that's kind of just where we've found our footing. But I think that getting to those next bigger levels gets easier if we continue to kind of, for us at least, if we continue to double down on the subject matter expertise of like how the macro trends and how things work in the home services and construction space. Also, like what you were talking about before, you build a brand for yourself over the course of years and years. You build all these connections at the same time, and you have this kind of like black book of people that you can tap into that are in that space. And so as we continue to do that more and more, I think we'll see more opportunities naturally in home services and construction, just out of virtue of who we're working with. If this dumpster rental business closes, the clients and the customers that we'll have are all other businesses that could be future deals. Maybe it makes sense to acquire one of them, fold it in. Maybe we have an exit and we acquire one. That's something that we've talked about with the investor that we're working with, and he's very excited about that opportunity. We're also making connections with people like investment banks and brokers that work with family offices and have deep pockets and maybe have the ability to take a really big swing. Maybe it's bigger than one deal for them when we work on a deal with them and they say, hey, we want you guys to just manage and operate the company and put the right layers of management in place, but we want to quickly acquire as much of this in the area as possible and start to consolidate. So I'm very excited about opportunities like that, because I think like I said before, like the biggest enjoyment for me personally just comes out of like taking it to that next stage of the game and kind of like leveling up our business experience. And I think we only get there if we're trying to do it a little bit bigger each time.
Yeah. Well, man, as we wrap up here, I'd love to get your thoughts on where should someone start if they want to take that bet on themselves for the first time. Maybe they're in corporate America, maybe they already are working in a small business, and they're just like, hey, I think I want to do something else. What would be your advice to that individual?
I would say think a lot about what your personal situation demands. Some of the stuff we talked about earlier, to kind of recap, is what is your personality type? Do you thrive well under pressure? Do you not? That should probably color a little bit of like how you take that bet on yourself, because there are risky ways to take that bet and there are less risky ways depending on what your personality type is. So do kind of a self-inventory there, like understand that and really like soak that in and make the right decision for you, not just for what people are saying is the right thing, because everyone's different. And then I think deeply about what your experience has been. Like, where have you built some of that subject matter expertise that can give you an unfair advantage? Where do you have connections, resources? Where do you have understanding of a place in the market that could just make you more likely to succeed? And I think that's probably where you're going to find your best opportunity. And for us, we didn't necessarily know that going in, and most people probably won't. But I would encourage them to have more conversations with the people that are doing things like what they're doing, and just try to eliminate some of like the guesswork that would come with not talking to those people. There's plenty of people like yourself, like myself, like people way more experienced than us that have at least tried things that maybe you haven't tried, that you could go talk to, ask about things, and maybe some of the thoughts that you had are things that inevitably wouldn't have worked out and that would have wasted some of your time. And so the more you try to shortcut some of those, like those wrong moves or those wrong steps, the more you take the right one.
Yeah. That's honestly my favorite part about working at Fitzgibbon Alexander is that whenever I call Matt Fitzgibbon, our qualifying broker, I'm like, hey, I have this really weird situation. I had this really weird conversation, really weird situation. He goes, it's not that weird. I've seen it like 500 times. This is what you do. Boom, boom, boom. And it's like, oh,
yeah, never
would have thought about that.
And here you are probably like agonizing over it. Like, oh man, how do I get past this? Or like, is this deal, is there a deal to be had here? And he's like, oh, that's like, I do that every day.
Yeah.
I did that yesterday.
His favorite thing is, it depends. Should I do this or this? It depends. All right. Well,
Tell me more.
Yeah. But I think those real world situations are, you just can't get it until you do it. Right. You just can't.
That's true.
You can't figure it out until you just do it. And I appreciate you, man, because you are literally out there just figuring it out, doing it, right? Chef on the fly. You're living your life and your business, not on the fly, right? You've got some real structure and some thought behind it. But I appreciate that about you, that you're like, hey, I'm not this big private equity guy, but I'm figuring it out. And the deals are showing it, man. So I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, man, and what you're doing. I think these types of conversations are important. And I mean, I have kind of like dabbled into doing podcasts myself, and we were talking about this the other day. And I think there's just so many people out there that have interesting things to share, like have valuable information that they don't realize is valuable. And I think when you start to have some of these conversations and share them, there might be things that I said that in this conversation that to me it's obvious, and like it's just something I've lived for the last couple of years. But for maybe someone who's a lot younger than me, or someone who is trying to make a transition, maybe it's just something they haven't heard before. And I've been lucky enough to have so many conversations with people way more experienced than me, way more accomplished than me, and way more qualified than me for these things, and for them to pass down knowledge and share knowledge. And I think it's just such a great medium to be able to get more of that out there for people who might learn something from it.
What's so funny is my pastor, shout out Mike Atkins, he tells us all the time, he'll be like, I'll say something, and something happens to my words between me saying it to reaching your ears, where people will come up to me afterwards, this is him speaking, and say, I love when you said X, Y, and Z. And he's like, I never said that, right? Right. And I've had feedback from this podcast where someone's like, hey, I love when your guest, Justin said X, Y, and Z, and it really spoke to me because I'm trying to do this in my life. And I'm like, he never said that, right? But I think there's just so many podcasts out there where, it's this unicorn tech, billionaire. They raised X amount of money. They had all these right things in place. And like, that is cool and inspiring. But like, I'm inspired by your story because like, not that it's easy, but that seems way more within my control than raising $500 million and doing this big tech startup, right? Like maybe I could do that, but I know that if I work hard enough and I do the right connections, I can at least build something tangible here. And that's what's, I think, so inspiring about all these conversations I've been having.
Yeah, and I think there's something really real there, right? I mean, like one deal could change your life. You could just find the right things and put one deal together, and all of a sudden you're in a dramatically different situation. And that's kind of where I find myself right now with this deal that we were talking about. We've got great stuff going for us already that has already changed my life in certain ways. But if this deal goes through, it's definitely life changing. Like that, it will put me in a different position where I can take steps up that I haven't been able to take before. And it is one deal. If it closes, that happens. And so I think there's something really encouraging about that. Like when you see these people that are kind of at the top of the mountain already, you don't see the journey up there. And there was a journey at some point, whether they talked about it on the way up or not. And there's just not really much you can glean from that. If you're listening to an interview with Jeff Bezos and he's talking about his thoughts on a day-to-day basis, it probably doesn't apply to you very much. Like we're just not there yet. But if you're talking to someone who is maybe in a position where they're a little bit more of a peer, or maybe they've just tried a couple more things than you've tried, or they've had like a couple more steps in the direction that you're thinking about taking, I think it becomes a lot more easy to figure out, do I want to continue taking that direction? Do I want to try this thing? Or do I want to try a different thing? So I've always found a lot of value out of just like trying to talk to people that are like either right at that same level as me or a step right behind me, step right ahead of me. Whether it's in a personal aspect of their life, a professional aspect, I think there's a lot to be gained from each. There's that saying of like, you should always have at least one mentor, one mentee, and one peer. And I think that's so important for everyone. Yeah. And I try to have as many as possible of all of those.
Well, dude, I don't think we can end it any better than that, man. I appreciate you, man. Your information will obviously be in the bottom of this video here, but thanks for coming on. Actually, thanks for having me on because we're in your podcast studio. So thank you for having me on my podcast.
Thanks for having me on the podcast. Yeah.
Cool, man.